Every new year feels like a reset, yet most people step into it carrying the same mind, the same habits, and the same fears, only dressed up by a different calendar. While Stoicism teaches something uncomfortable but powerful, a new year does not change you, only what you carry into it does. As 2026 approaches, this is not about motivation, hype, or false positivity, but about entering the year with the right internal tools, the kind that make you resilient when things go wrong, disciplined when motivation fades, and calm when life tests you. And the first of those tools is control over your reactions. If you enter 2026 without mastering how you respond to events, you will spend the entire year being controlled by people, circumstances, emotions, and situations, which is why Stoics believed this was one of the most important skills a human could develop. Epictetus said that it is not what happens to you that disturbs you, but your judgment about what happens. And this simple truth reveals that the real damage in life rarely comes from events themselves, but from how quickly and emotionally we respond to them. Most people enter a new year hoping for fewer problems, while Stoics entered expecting problems and trained themselves to remain steady in the face of them, knowing that in 2026 there will be disappointment, delays, criticism, rejection, stress, and people who misunderstand you, all of which are unavoidable, but panic, anger, self-pity, emotional spirals, and impulsive decisions are optional. Control over your reactions is not suppression, because Stoics did not deny emotions, they simply refused to be ruled by them. Understanding that reactions are like fire, capable of warming your life or burning it down, depending on how they are handled. Most people fail here because they react automatically, speaking before thinking, acting before understanding, and letting emotions decide the direction of their day. Even though a single moment of uncontrolled reaction can damage relationships, ruin opportunities, waste days of mental energy, and create regret that lasts for months, which is why Stoics understood that real power lies in delayed reaction. When something goes wrong, the strongest response is not immediate action, but pause, because in that pause lives freedom. Stoics trained themselves to ask a simple question before reacting, whether something was within their control, and if it was not, they let go, not emotionally, but strategically, knowing that energy spent fighting reality is energy stolen from growth. Entering 2026 with this mindset changes everything, as insults lose their power, stress shortens, anxiety weakens, and decision-making becomes clearer, moving you from reaction mode into command mode. Reaction control is not a one-time resolution, but a daily discipline built moment by moment through slowing speech, delaying responses, observing emotions instead of obeying them, and responding intentionally rather than instinctively. Because Stoics believed the calmest person in the room holds the most power, not the loudest or most emotional one. In 2026, you do not need to win every argument, prove every point, or react to every trigger. You need clarity, because control over reactions in real life means not letting one bad moment ruin your entire day, not allowing criticism to define your self-worth, not chasing instant relief through anger or distraction, and not letting fear decide your next move, choosing long-term strength over short-term emotion instead. Most people regret what they say when they are emotional, and very few regret staying calm, which is why Stoics trained for this, knowing that while life is unpredictable, character does not have to be. If you enter 2026 reacting the same way you did in 2025, nothing truly changes. But if you enter the year with awareness before emotion, thought before speech, and discipline before impulse, even difficult years become productive ones, because you do not need a perfect year, you need a steady mind. Stoicism does not promise happiness, it promises stability, and stability is what allows progress, which is why Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that you have power over your mind and not outside events, and realizing this is where strength is found. So enter 2026 remembering this, not to control the world or other people, but to control the only thing that truly belongs to you, your response.
Enter 2026 with discipline, not motivation, because Stoics never trusted feelings to carry them through life, knowing that emotions rise and fall without warning, while discipline remains when enthusiasm disappears. Motivation is loud at the beginning of a new year, but it fades quietly, leaving most people confused about why they stopped. Whereas discipline does not ask how you feel, it simply asks what must be done. Stoics believed that a person who relies on motivation lives at the mercy of their mood, and moods are among the most unreliable forces in human nature. Marcus Aurelius wrote his meditations not to inspire himself, but to remind himself, because even an emperor knew that the mind forgets its duty when comfort and distraction are nearby. Discipline, in Stoic thought, was not harsh punishment, but self-respect in action, the ability to do what aligns with reason even when it is inconvenient. Entering 2026 with discipline means building systems instead of chasing bursts of inspiration, showing up consistently rather than waiting to feel ready, and understanding that progress is often boring, repetitive, and invisible in the moment. Stoics accepted this reality fully, which is why they emphasized habit over intensity, knowing that a small action repeated daily shapes character more reliably than rare moments of extreme effort. Motivation asks for reward first, while discipline works without promise, trusting that effort itself has value. And this distinction is what separates those who start strong from those who finish strong. In practical terms, discipline looks like doing the task you planned even when no one is watching, continuing when results are slow, and resisting the temptation to quit simply because the process feels uncomfortable. Stoics viewed comfort as a dangerous teacher because it trains the mind to avoid effort and seek ease, slowly weakening resilience over time. Discipline reverses this by teaching the mind that discomfort is survivable and often necessary for growth. Entering 2026 with discipline also means accepting that some days will feel heavy, unproductive, or uninspired, and refusing to interpret those days as failure. A disciplined person does not ask whether a day felt good, but whether they acted in accordance with their values. This shift removes emotional drama from progress and replaces it with quiet consistency. Many people abandon their goals not because they are impossible, but because they expected them to feel exciting, and when excitement fades, they assume something is wrong. Stoicism corrects this misunderstanding by framing effort as duty rather than passion, something done because it is right, not because it is pleasurable. Discipline also protects you from self-deception because it exposes excuses for what they are, stories the mind tells to avoid effort. Stoics believed that mastery of the self was the highest form of power, and discipline was the tool through which that mastery was expressed. When you enter 2026 with discipline, you stop negotiating with your impulses and start directing them, which creates a sense of internal order that spills into every area of life. Over time, this order builds confidence, not the loud kind based on achievement, but the quiet kind based on trust in your own reliability. You begin to know that when you say you will do something, you will follow through, and that knowledge alone stabilizes the mind. Discipline also frees you from constant self-evaluation, because when your actions are consistent, you no longer need to constantly question your direction. The Stoic did not aim to feel disciplined, but to be disciplined, understanding that feelings follow behavior, not the other way around. Entering 2026 this way allows you to move forward even in uncertainty, because your progress is no longer dependent on emotion or mood. You work when it is hard, you rest when it is reasonable, and you return when it is time, without drama or self-betrayal. Over the course of a year, this approach quietly outperforms motivation every time, because while motivation burns fast and fades, discipline compounds, shaping not just outcomes, but character. Carry this into 2026, and regardless of how inspired you feel, you will move steadily forward, anchored by habit, guided by reason, and strengthened by consistency. Entering 2026 with acceptance of uncertainty, because Stoics understood that the greatest source of anxiety is not difficulty itself, but the illusion that life should be predictable, fair, or under control. Most people enter a new year carrying silent expectations, believing that effort should guarantee results, good intentions should prevent hardship, and careful planning should protect them from disruption. Yet Stoicism teaches that the universe does not operate on personal contracts. Events unfold according to causes beyond individual desire, and resisting this reality creates constant inner conflict. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that change is the nature of all things, and that clinging to stability in a changing world is like trying to stop a river with your hands. Entering 2026 without accepting uncertainty guarantees frustration, because every unexpected obstacle will feel like an injustice rather than a normal part of existence. Stoics did not view uncertainty as something to fear, but something to cooperate with, understanding that rigidity breaks while adaptability endures. When you accept uncertainty, you stop demanding that life meet your expectations and start preparing yourself to meet life as it is, which immediately reduces mental strain. This acceptance does not mean passivity or surrender, but clarity, because a person who accepts uncertainty plans carefully while remaining flexible, working hard without assuming outcomes. Stoics trained themselves to detach effort from results, knowing that effort is theirs while results are borrowed from chance, timing, and circumstance. Entering 2026 with this mindset protects you from bitterness, because when plans fail, you do not interpret failure as personal betrayal by the world, but as a signal to adjust. Many people suffer not because their goals collapse, but because their identity collapses with them, having tied their sense of self too tightly to specific outcomes. Stoicism prevents this by grounding identity in character rather than success, teaching that a good life is measured by how one acts under uncertainty, not by how often things go according to plan. Impermanence was another truth Stoics kept close, understanding that everything in life, including comfort, stability, relationships, status, and even hardship, is temporary. Remembering this did not make them pessimistic, but sober, because when you accept that nothing lasts forever, you stop clinging desperately to pleasure and stop fearing difficulty as if it were permanent. Entering 2026 with awareness of impermanence changes how you respond to both success and failure, because success no longer inflates the ego and failure no longer crushes the spirit. Both are seen as passing states rather than final judgments. This mindset creates emotional balance, allowing you to stay grounded when praised and composed when criticized. Stoics practiced this awareness daily, reminding themselves that people they love, opportunities they enjoy, and circumstances they rely on could change at any moment, not to create anxiety, but to cultivate gratitude and presence. When you truly understand impermanence, you stop postponing meaningful action because you recognize that time is uncertain and delays are not guaranteed. Entering 2026 with acceptance of uncertainty also strengthens courage, because fear often comes from imagining permanent loss, irreversible failure, or lasting shame, all of which dissolve when you see life as a series of changing moments rather than fixed outcomes. A Stoic did not aim for control over the future, but readiness for it, knowing that preparedness is more reliable than prediction. This readiness includes emotional readiness, the ability to face disappointment without collapse, and mental readiness, the ability to revise plans without self-blame. Many people resist uncertainty by seeking constant reassurance, external validation, or rigid routines, but Stoicism teaches that inner stability comes from trusting your capacity to adapt rather than your ability to foresee. Entering 2026 with this trust allows you to move forward without needing guarantees, because you know that regardless of what happens, you can respond with reason and integrity. This does not remove pain, but it prevents suffering from multiplying unnecessarily. Pain may be unavoidable, but suffering is often the result of resistance to what already is. Stoics understood that fighting reality wastes energy that could be used to improve it, and that peace comes not from controlling circumstances, but by aligning expectations with nature. By carrying acceptance of uncertainty into 2026, you give yourself permission to grow without knowing exactly where the path leads, to act without certainty of reward, and to remain calm even when outcomes remain unclear. This mindset transforms the year from a test you must pass into a journey you are equipped to navigate, where challenges become training rather than punishment, and change becomes something to work with rather than fear. Enter the year knowing that nothing is guaranteed, and instead of weakening you, this truth will steady you. Because when you expect uncertainty, you stop being surprised by it, and when you stop being surprised, you stop being shaken.
Enter 2026 with fewer desires, not bigger ones, because Stoicism teaches that most human suffering does not come from having too little, but from wanting too much, too often, and without limit. Modern culture convinces people that a new year requires bigger goals, higher standards, faster results, and constant upgrades. But Stoics believed that expanding desire without discipline only expands frustration, because every uncontrolled desire becomes a contract for disappointment. Epictetus warned that the quickest way to lose peace is to tie your happiness to outcomes you cannot fully command, and desire does exactly that by attaching your sense of fulfillment to external rewards, timelines, recognition, or approval. When you enter a new year overloaded with wants, you unknowingly hand your emotional stability to forces outside yourself, because now your mood depends on success, your confidence depends on progress, and your self-worth depends on comparison. Stoicism does not argue against ambition, but it insists that ambition must be refined, because ambition driven by excess desire leads to impatience, envy, and constant dissatisfaction, while ambition guided by restraint leads to clarity and endurance. A Stoic understood that wanting less does not mean settling for less. It means removing the unnecessary hunger that drains focus and peace, allowing you to pursue what truly matters without internal chaos. When desires are unchecked, even achievement feels empty, because the mind immediately reaches for the next thing, the next level, the next validation, turning life into an endless chase with no arrival point. Stoics saw this trap clearly and chose a different approach, training themselves to want only what was necessary for virtue, growth, and contribution, while treating everything else as optional. Entering 2026 with fewer desires means no longer craving constant comfort, instant gratification, or external affirmation, because these cravings weaken resilience and create dependence. It means recognizing that wanting less attention, less approval, and less control over outcomes actually gives you more freedom, because your inner state becomes harder to disturb. Seneca wrote that poverty is not having little, but wanting more. And this idea applies not just to money, but to status, relationships, success, and even happiness itself. When you want less, setbacks lose their sting because they no longer threaten your identity, and progress feels lighter because it is not burdened by desperation. Many people confuse desire with purpose, but Stoics separated the two, understanding that purpose is stable and internal, while desire is volatile and external. Purpose directs your actions calmly, while desire pushes you restlessly, and entering a new year driven by restlessness leads to burnout, impatience, and quiet resentment. By reducing desire, you gain the ability to delay gratification, endure uncertainty, and stay consistent even when results are slow, which is why Stoics valued temperance as much as courage or wisdom. In practical terms, entering 2026 with fewer desires means simplifying what success looks like, narrowing your focus, and refusing to chase everything that looks impressive but adds little meaning. It means being selective about goals, disciplined about consumption, and honest about what truly improves your character rather than your image. This mindset also protects you from comparison, because when your desires are minimal, other people's achievements lose their power over you, and envy fades naturally without effort. A Stoic did not measure life by how much was acquired, but by how little was needed to live well. And this shift alone can transform how a year unfolds. When desire shrinks, gratitude grows, not as forced positivity, but as a natural result of contentment with enough. Entering 2026 this way allows you to work hard without desperation, improve without self-hatred, and strive without losing peace, because your happiness is no longer postponed until some future milestone. The Stoic goal was never to eliminate desire completely, but to place it under reason so it serves life rather than consumes it. If you carry this into 2026, you will move slower than the desperate, but farther than the restless, because while others burn energy chasing more, you conserve strength by needing less. And that quiet strength compounds over time, making your progress steadier, your mind calmer, and your year more intentional. Enter 2026 with radical personal responsibility. Because Stoicism teaches that the moment you blame circumstances, people, luck, or timing for your condition, you surrender the only power you ever truly had. Most people enter a new year carrying quiet excuses, some obvious and some subtle, telling themselves they would be further ahead if things had been fairer, if others had supported them more, if opportunities had arrived sooner, or if life had not been so demanding. Yet Stoics rejected this way of thinking completely, not because it was cruel, but because it was weak. Epictetus reminded his students that no one is harmed unless they consent to it internally, meaning that while events may limit options, they never remove responsibility for how one responds, adapts, and acts. Radical responsibility does not mean denying external hardship. It means refusing to let hardship decide who you become. Because Stoics believed that character is forged precisely in conditions that are less than ideal. Entering 2026 with this mindset means abandoning the idea that progress depends on perfect circumstances, supportive environments, or ideal timing, and replacing it with the belief that growth is possible wherever you are placed. Many people unknowingly delay their lives by waiting for permission, clarity, confidence, or validation, assuming that once these arrive, action will follow. But Stoicism reverses this sequence, teaching that action creates clarity, responsibility builds confidence, and self-trust emerges from repeated follow-through. When you take full responsibility, you stop negotiating with reality and start working with it, no longer asking who is at fault, but asking what can be done now. This shift is uncomfortable at first because it removes comforting narratives of victimhood, but it is also freeing because it places control back where it belongs, in your hands. Stoics understood that blaming others feels relieving in the moment, but it weakens the mind over time, training it to look outward for solutions instead of inward for strength. Radical responsibility forces honesty, not the harsh kind that shames, but the clear kind that reveals where effort has been inconsistent, where priorities have been confused, and where discipline has been avoided. Entering 2026 with this clarity allows you to stop repeating the same cycles under different names, because once you accept responsibility, patterns become visible and change becomes possible. Responsibility also sharpens focus because when you accept that your results are connected to your actions, attention naturally shifts toward habits, decisions, and daily behavior rather than distant hopes or abstract goals. Stoics did not waste time fantasizing about outcomes detached from effort because they knew that wishing is not a strategy and intention without action is meaningless. Instead, they trained themselves to ask whether their daily conduct aligned with the life they claimed to want, understanding that the gap between desire and reality is always filled by behavior. Radical responsibility also eliminates the need for constant comparison because when you accept full ownership of your path, other people's progress becomes irrelevant information rather than emotional disturbance. Envy fades naturally when you understand that your life is not delayed by others' success, but shaped by your own choices. Stoics believed that comparison is a distraction from duty, pulling attention away from what must be done and redirecting it toward what cannot be controlled. Entering 2026 with responsibility also means accepting responsibility for your inner state, recognizing that while emotions arise naturally, how long they linger and how deeply they influence behavior is often a matter of permission. This does not mean suppressing emotion, but refusing to build identity around it, because Stoics believed that emotional suffering intensifies when it becomes a story you repeatedly tell yourself, rather than a sensation you allow to pass. Radical responsibility teaches you to stop outsourcing emotional regulation to circumstances, relationships, or achievements, and instead develop the capacity to stabilize yourself internally. This is why Stoics valued self-mastery above external success, knowing that a person who cannot govern themselves will never truly govern their life. Responsibility also brings precision to decision-making, because when you stop blaming the past, you become more attentive to the present, recognizing that small choices accumulate quietly into large outcomes. Many people underestimate how much their year is shaped by ordinary, repeatable actions, assuming that transformation requires dramatic change, while Stoics understood that character is forged through consistent adherence to principle, even when no immediate reward is visible. Entering 2026 with responsibility means accepting that boredom, resistance, and discomfort are part of meaningful effort and refusing to use them as excuses to disengage. It means acknowledging that no one is coming to save you from the consequences of inaction, and that this truth, while heavy, is also empowering. Stoics did not see responsibility as a burden, but proof of agency, because to be responsible is to be capable of influence. Without responsibility, life becomes something that happens to you, but with it, life becomes something you participate in deliberately. Radical responsibility also reshapes how you view mistakes, because instead of using them as evidence of inadequacy, you treat them as information, signals that guide adjustment rather than reasons for self-punishment. Stoics believed that error is inevitable, but persistence in error is optional, and responsibility is what allows learning to occur.
Entering 2026 this way prevents stagnation, because when progress stalls, you do not search for external explanations first. You examine habits, effort, and alignment with values. This inward turn is uncomfortable for the ego, but nourishing for growth, because it removes illusion and replaces it with agency. Responsibility also deepens self-respect, because every time you act in accordance with what you know to be right, you reinforce trust in yourself, and that trust becomes a quiet confidence that does not depend on praise or recognition. Over time, this confidence stabilizes ambition, because you no longer need constant reassurance that you are moving in the right direction. You know it through action. Entering 2026 with radical responsibility means refusing to wait for life to improve before you improve, and instead becoming the kind of person who adapts, learns, and advances regardless of conditions. Stoics believed that while we do not choose the cards we are dealt, we are responsible for how we play them, and this belief allowed them to remain steady in exile, illness, loss, and uncertainty. Carry this into 2026, and the year stops feeling like something that must treat you kindly in order for you to thrive, and becomes something you can navigate with strength regardless of how it unfolds. Because when responsibility is fully accepted, excuses disappear, clarity sharpens, effort intensifies, and progress becomes inevitable. Not because life is easy, but because you are no longer waiting for permission to act.
Enter 2026 with a clear understanding of what is enough for you, because Stoics believed that a life without defined values is easily consumed by noise, comparison, and endless pursuit. Most people enter a new year chasing improvement without ever asking, improvement toward what? Assuming that more success, more money, more recognition, or more comfort will eventually create satisfaction. Yet Stoicism teaches that without a personal definition of enough, no amount of progress will feel complete. Marcus Aurelius warned himself repeatedly not to live as if he had 10,000 years ahead of him, because time is limited, and life becomes chaotic when energy is spent chasing things that do not align with one's core principles. Entering 2026 with clarity about what truly matters almost guarantees distraction, because the world constantly offers new goals, new standards, and new desires, many of which conflict with each other and quietly drain focus. Stoics believe that values act as an internal compass, allowing you to move decisively without constantly second-guessing direction, while a lack of values leaves you reacting to whatever seems impressive or urgent in the moment. When you do not know what enough looks like, ambition becomes endless hunger rather than purposeful movement, and hunger without limits turns progress into exhaustion. Stoicism does not reject growth, but it insists that growth must serve character rather than ego, because growth detached from values often leads to emptiness rather than fulfillment. Entering 2026 with defined values means knowing what you are willing to sacrifice for, and, equally important, what you are not willing to sacrifice, such as integrity, health, peace of mind, or meaningful relationships. Many people lose years not because they lacked opportunity, but because they chased goals that were never truly theirs, adopting definitions of success borrowed from society, peers, or social media. Stoics trained themselves to examine their desires carefully, asking whether a pursuit strengthened virtue or merely inflated status, because they understood that status fades quickly while character endures. A clear sense of enough also protects you from burnout, because when you know what you are working toward, you know when to stop pushing and when to rest, rather than being driven by vague pressure to do more simply because others are doing more. Entering 2026 with this clarity transforms how you measure progress, shifting the metric from constant external validation to internal alignment, where a day is considered successful not because it looked impressive, but because actions matched values. Stoics believed that peace comes from living in agreement with one's nature, and that inner conflict arises when behavior contradicts belief, even if outcomes appear positive on the surface.
Without clarity of values, it becomes easy to justify compromises that slowly erode self-respect, because short-term gains mask long-term costs. But Stoicism emphasizes that every choice shapes character, and character shapes destiny. Entering the year knowing what enough means financially, socially, emotionally, and professionally reduces anxiety, because you stop feeling perpetually behind in a race you never agreed to run. Many people live as if satisfaction is always one achievement away, postponing contentment indefinitely, while Stoics believe that contentment should exist alongside effort, not wait at the end of it. This does not mean settling for mediocrity, but anchoring ambition to meaning rather than comparison. Clarity of values also strengthens decision-making under pressure, because when choices arise, you are not forced to analyze endlessly. You simply ask whether an option aligns with your principles. This reduces mental fatigue and regret, because decisions made in alignment with values are easier to accept even when outcomes are uncertain. Stoics understood that regret often comes not from failure, but from acting against one's own judgment in pursuit of approval or fear of missing out. Entering 2026 with a defined sense of enough also sharpens focus, because when priorities are clear, distractions lose their appeal, and time is spent intentionally rather than reactively. Without this clarity, even productive activity can become a form of avoidance, keeping you busy while preventing deeper progress. Stoics valued simplicity for this reason, believing that a simpler life allowed greater attention to what truly mattered, including thought, action, and moral development. Knowing what enough looks like also reshapes your relationship with success, because success no longer inflates the ego or destabilizes identity. It becomes something appreciated without being clung to. Likewise, setbacks lose their power to define you, because your worth is not tied to constant upward movement, but to consistent adherence to values. Entering 2026 with this mindset allows you to pursue goals vigorously while remaining internally steady, because your sense of self is anchored, not drifting with circumstance. Stoics believe that a person who knows what they stand for is difficult to manipulate, intimidate, or distract, because they are not easily swayed by trends, opinions, or external pressure. This inner solidity becomes increasingly valuable in a fast-changing world where clarity is rare and confusion is profitable. Carrying clarity of values into 2026 also deepens satisfaction in ordinary moments, because when life aligns with what you consider meaningful, even small actions feel significant, and progress feels real rather than hollow. Stoics did not seek constant pleasure, but they valued quiet contentment that comes from living deliberately, and they understood that contentment is impossible without knowing when enough has been reached. Entering the year without this understanding risks turning life into an endless checklist with no sense of arrival, while entering with it allows effort and peace to coexist. By defining what matters, what does not, and what is sufficient, you give the year structure without rigidity, ambition without desperation, and progress without losing yourself in the process. Carry this into 2026, and instead of being pulled in every direction by possibility, you will move forward guided by principle, knowing not just how to strive, but when to stop, when to rest, and when to say that this, right now, is enough.